What I'm all about is helping families to thrive. So helping parents have great relationships with their kids, helping kids have great relations with their parents, so that really home life is as happy as it possibly can be. As an adolescent therapist, I'm in that very fortunate position of spending a lot of time with young people. And so I understand the challenges that they're facing on a day-to-day basis because they talk to me about them. I also have that knowledge of, adolescent development, the cognitive brain development that they're going through and how that's likely to have an impact on their behavior. So you put the two together, so you get that all around the child viewpoint, which I think is really helpful then to be able to share with parents. The biggest challenge faced by teenagers and therefore by their families right now is mental health. I'm talking particularly about things like anxiety and depression. But that has definitely been exacerbated by their access to the online world, social media, and now really, really not helped by a year of COVID and lockdowns and isolation and being out of school. What I'd like to do is maybe just to offer you a little bit of guidance that might be useful for you right now. Lockdown is ending, they're going back to school, and I'm sure for the vast majority of parents that is a massive relief. And also for the majority of pupils, but there will be a significant number for whom the idea of returning to school is very, very challenging. So if your kids are suddenly really stroppy about the idea of going back to school, you need to perhaps read stroppy as stressed. And then you need to use your empathy skills to try and find out what it is that they are stressed about. Because for some of them, the idea of going back into the social scene is really threatening. For others, it might be worrying about being on track with the academics. There's lots and lots of different reasons. But if we focus on that stroppy behavior, we just end up getting cross, where actually underneath that is probably a child who's struggling with the idea of the change again. If yours are still struggling with that really early morning routine again, just remember the circadian rhythms, which is your sleep cycle, shifts during adolescence. So they are absolutely programmed to go to sleep later and to wake up later. So when you wake a teenager up to go to school at 7 in the morning, it's the equivalent of somebody putting you out of sleep at about 4 in the morning. It's actually pretty mean. So we want to go as gently as possible by just making enough noise that you see them move, which will help them to come from that very deep sleep cycle into the lighter sleep cycle. Then give them 10 minutes, but don't expect anything too quickly because, as I say, it takes a while to come out of that really deep sleep. So I think you've got to recognise that particularly during adolescence, there is bound to be a certain amount of conflict. They're trying to go for independence and their identity, and we're still trying to keep them on track with all the stuff that they should be doing. So that our needs and their needs are going to clash from time to time. So just a few pointers. First off, really let go of your need to be in control because it tends to cause massive amounts of friction. My golden rule for parenting is wherever possible, ask, don't tell. So ask them what they think they need to be doing. Ask them why they think they need to be doing that. So we're encouraging them to come up with their own solutions and to start to take control and to manage themselves. If an argument starts and the voices start to be raised, the golden rule is that you don't raise yours to match them, because then you just end up in a slanging match. What you want to do is to go very quiet, almost to the point of a whisper, to help them come back down again, because you can't have those rational conversations in the middle of high emotion. So in the middle of high emotion, we stop operating from our prefrontal cortex and we start operating from our limbic brain. So we have gone into that fight, flight or freeze response. There is almost nobody better at pushing your buttons quite often than your kids are. But we have to take that little step back, and modeling for them that in the middle of high drama, we don't just go back shouting and screaming at people. We take a step back, we take a bit of time out to give everybody a chance to calm down before we try to do the rational problem solving. Do not underestimate how important you acknowledging that they're getting things right is for them. They are highly motivated to keep us on side, and therefore every little tiny bit of praise that you drop into their ears is like a little bit of gold dust. So if you haven't found something that you could be positive about with them today, start to focus on those little moments where they are getting things right. So what you notice is what you get more of, what you praise will be repeated. Teens and screens, the font of most conflict within families. And I know that because we have thousands of parents ringing in, asking us, how do we manage screen time? So I think the really big thing is not to try and set it in time limits, because if you try and do that, you're going to end up having to police them, and you're going to have to sit there thinking, oh, I know I said I could have an hour and 20 minutes. Where am I in all of that? And that causes huge ructions. I think it is way more effective to have times of the day and perhaps even locations where screens are banned. Putting in some boundaries around meal times, maybe having a chunk in each day where nobody is on their screens. And the really important thing is that you're modeling this as well. So make it workable. And if you have no other rule in your house at all, the one you absolutely mustn't give way on is no screens in bedrooms overnight, because the stats will show you that 2/3 of teenagers who have their phones in their bedrooms overnight will check their social media feeds. You then get into poor sleep quality, and that causes massive problems in terms of anxiety. It can lead to low mood. It brings out symptoms of things like ADHD. So sleep is utterly vital and mustn't be compromised by screens. If you have gone to the bother of setting up a formal boundary, you have got to maintain it. And you've also got to have a consequence. So when they're pushing you and you're thinking, oh my God, I'd just so much rather have a glass of wine than deal with this right now. If you've set the boundary, you've got to be consistent, because if you're not consistent, you end up rewarding unhelpful behavior, but also you become unreliable. Think of it as short-term pain for long-term gain. The elastic conversation is a conversation that I have always had with them when they're really pretty young, late childhood, early teens. And I'll say to them, look, you're supposed to be going for independence and to be able to manage yourself. And that's what we're all aiming for here. So imagine you're on a piece of elastic, and your job is to take the elastic and it's to pull away. And hopefully by the time we get to 18, we'll all go, fab job, bye, have a great future. In the meantime, my job is to set you up to be able to take the elastic, but it's also to keep you safe. So if you prove yourself unworthy of that elastic, i.e. that freedom, then I reserve the right to tweak it back in line just until you've learned to be able to use it responsibly again. Research shows us that about the first 20 minutes of social media use leads us to feel better and happier, but thereafter it starts to decline as we go into more of the compare and despair, the envy zone, which doesn't make us feel good. We've got to encourage them to start to notice how they're feeling moment by moment when they're using things like social media. Because if they can see, oh, it's so exciting, I've seen this and she's doing that, and I love those shoes that person's wearing, and they're feeling good, that's great. But there will come a point where suddenly you're thinking, oh, actually, I'm missing out a bit here, or my life doesn't look as exciting as that. So your kids might well find that they get more out of it and enjoy it more if they have several small kind of 15, 20-minute chunks of social media time spread through the day than if they end up sitting there just scrolling mindlessly through for an hour and a half, 2 hours. So I've given you all these tips. And of course, in a gorgeous sunny day when we're feeling great about ourselves, they're probably much easier to put in place than on other days. But I'm a mum. I've been there when you're trying to get out of the door first thing in the morning and nobody seems to be playing ball, and you end up screaming and shouting, and then you think, oh my God, where did that come from? So I'm hoping that they're going to be helpful, but please don't beat yourself up when it doesn't go quite according to plan, because it never will the whole way through adolescence. And frankly, our kids don't need us to be perfect. That would just be another thing for them to have to live up to. We just need to be good enough. And occasionally the best thing you can do is to learn how to say sorry.